Hello, welcome to the Health In Show, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community. We are broadcasting remotely live from Portland, Maine. Today is September 30th, 2012, and I'm sitting here next to Grant Bentley of the Homeopathy Facial Analysis Method, and I'm going to give him a little bit of an introduction. He's from the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, the VCCH, and if you want to find that online, it's vcch.org, and he runs a postgraduate program in classical homeopathy. And if you are unfamiliar with this form of medicine, it is the second most used form of medicine in the world today, and it is a 200-year-old system that uses substances found in nature to stimulate the body to heal at a very deep emotional and physical level. VCCH was established in 1989 and it is a small college in Melbourne, Australia's eastern suburbs. From 2005, VCCH has been providing training to qualified homeopaths as an opportunity and also has opportunities to sit into live clinics. VCCH is also a leading researcher in homeopathic medicine, and what we have been learning here this weekend is an established, unique, world first system using genetic inheritance, or it's a special method of how the body copes with stresses. And we do that using a facial feature analysis. And it's very exciting to actually get our hands on this program and start working with it. That's what we've been doing today, the second day of the workshop. So I'm going to introduce Grant, and hopefully the folks out there can see him live. Today I am not on the Nissan Communications Network, and I want to also give my thanks to Amnon, the producer, who is working on a Sunday for me. Usually the show is broadcast on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, USA. So here we are together.
Hi, Debbie.
And if anybody does want to call in, I don't know if I have the number memorized, Amnon, 919
518
518
9773.
9773. So if you're in the United States and you go to the nissancommunications.com network, click on the channels, find the Health In Show, and we are live. It gives you the instructions. If you want to call in from outside the United States, you can use Skype by calling into Computers 2K Voice. And we're going to begin, just for those folks who are brand new to this form of medicine, to define what is homeopathy.
Homeopathy is a system of medicine that is specifically designed to improve the energy of people who are not only depleted of energy, but also to find that their natural energy levels are slightly erratic. What that means is that they may have a larger amount of energy, like what you see in kids with ADHD or things of that nature, but it's not particularly a usable energy. Over time, if there's too much stress, then what happens is that energy becomes depleted in the system, and any of the weaker areas that we are born with, could be anything, it could be our emotions, could be an organ, it could be our joints, they get denied that extra energy that they need to be able to maintain their optimum levels of functioning. And over time, that stress soon develops into a pathology. And what homeopathy is designed to do is to replace that lost energy and to rebalance the system out to try and help that patient's own healing process.
Thank you. And this is our second day of the workshop. So I feel as if all the folks out there who are in the listening audience, the viewing audience, have kind of come into the movie that has already begun, and they're seeing the second half. So we're kind of going to bring them up to speed to where we are in our learning. And that first step was, what is homeopathy and what is the goal? And that's to bring that energy back into the system which has been depleted of energy. It's also pattern matching.
Well, it's pattern matching in the sense that people's way of dealing with stress, particularly at an ongoing chronic level, is quite specific. And so what we need to do is we need to account for that individuality, and that means that's why you can't just go in and get any remedy off the shelf, or you can. When we're dealing with, say, some acute diseases or some acute manifestations like hay fever or so on, you can get some off-the-counter medicines for things like that. But when you're starting to get into some things that are a little deeper, like the way that you experience depression or perhaps some sort of organic breakdown, particularly when there has been a long period of stress and strain that has preceded the onset of those illnesses, then what we need to do then is that we need to be far more individualised, because it is not anything just off the shelf anymore. Our bodies can only utilise what is specific for it. We know, for example, with organ transplants, you just can't rip out the liver of one person and put it into another. We are specifically designed to recognise self and non-self continuously, and our own energy levels are like that as well. So what it is that a homeopath tries to do is that we try to get as good a picture as what we possibly can to come up with a way of delivering a kind of a package of energy to our patient in a medium that their body is going to accept. The moment that energy is then given to that person, then their own system has the innate ability to be able to distribute it and heal as healing needs to take place. So all it has is that it already knows what to do. Everybody's body already knows what to do, but what it is, what essentially by the time pathology comes around is that their bodies are denied the access to the resources that they actually, that is needed to fix the body. It's a little bit like the body only uses glucose. The cells will break down all sugars until it's glucose, because that's its real primary food. When we're dealing with things like our immune system, or we're dealing with cellular repair, if we don't have that energy, then our body is just incapable of being able to do its task. It's not that it hasn't forgotten, what to do. It knows what to do, but it doesn't have the resources to do it. So what we need to do is that we find out the cause and effect, the action, the reaction, and we put this into a sum total, a package of that individual, not only what they suffer from, but the experiences, the stresses that have got them to this point. And as a result of that, we can begin to understand not only just where they are now, but their whole journey that it has taken them to get to this point. Now, when that's incorporated, what we do is that we have a remedy that is specifically designed for that person. We then give that energy for that person, and their own system, which was ready to do what it should have been doing all along, but didn't have the energy resources to do it, now finds itself with those resources, and off it goes.
I have a two-part question. One, do you need somebody from the outside to take in all the details of your symptoms in order to put that package together and to do the facial analysis to know how to proceed? And also the second part was that it sounds very much, since it's a life journey, that this is dealing mostly with chronic long-term illness and not specifically like an acute thing that just comes up.
Well, to the second part of the question, there's a two-part answer, I suppose. And the first aspect is that homeopathy as an overall system is specifically designed to deal with both acute and chronic. But you've got to know there are different processes as to which one you apply at what, because there are slightly different procedures to treating each model. If you're going to treat the acute model, yes, that an acute disease has to be defined as something that is acute, and acute essentially means that it is not a repeating pattern of illness. So if you are an asthmatic and you have asthma attack, that is not an acute disease. It may be an acute exacerbation of an ongoing problem, but it is not an acute disease. So anything that is coming from our system, a fundamental flaw or something that is being produced by us, that's kind of like man-made in the sense that man being who we are. If it's coming from a design flaw in our system, then we need to incorporate that whole sort of facial analysis, and we need to incorporate the biography of the patient so we can begin to have a better understanding of the stresses and strains that they've been under. If you're talking about something that is purely acute, acute being, say, the common cold or a case of measles or scarlet fever or something which is really kind of more based on a germ rather than the outcome of a lifestyle or stress, then really there you don't need to have the whole biography or the facial analysis system there. But the facial analysis system is vital when you're dealing with what we call chronic disease, in the sense that it doesn't have an infectious origin, but it does, like arthritis, like asthma, like cancer and all these other sort of diseases. They're chronic in the sense that they are ongoing and that they increase year after year after year if they're not being managed properly. The way to manage them properly is always to stay as healthy and as happy as what you can be. But that's very hard to do once you've reached a very depleted level. It's hard to claw your way back. And generally, you need a little bit of help at that stage. As far as doing it yourself, look, if it's just scarlet fever, or if it went, when I say just scarlet fever, and that's serious enough, but if it's an outside microbial infection, then yes, you are probably more than likely able to open up any homeopathic diagnostic book and look up a group of remedies based on the pathology that you have, and you'd be able to treat yourself. But of course, if it got out of control or you weren't getting any relief, you want to seek someone's help pretty quickly, because these acute diseases can turn very rapidly. So you want to be very, very careful. And the other thing about that, when I think that needs a qualification, is often when you're that sick, you're not thinking all that clearly. So personally, I always think that you should go and see a homeopath rather than try and do it yourself. The other aspect when it comes to this chronic disease, then yes, I would again suggest that you get somebody to do it for you. The reason for that is that even though you may know your biography because you've lived it, you're living it on a day-to-day basis, whereas what a homeopath is looking for is that they are looking to see and spot certain repeating patterns in your life. Now, these repeating patterns in your life are definite peaks of stress. And so we can go through the different areas of stresses in your body, in your biography, and then analyse how deeply these stressors have affected you. The ones that affect you most are, we've got this saying that what doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. That's not true. What doesn't kill us may not necessarily make us stronger. It can kind of leave a little bit of a groove after a while. Yes. And that groove or that kind of indentation into our own system will start to play itself over and over again, like a record that gets stuck with a scratch. That's why we're looking for these repeating patterns, because that scratch or repeating pattern tells us where that groove has been made.
And the homeopath will be able to detect that. I find it interesting that when he opened that last statement, only scarlet fever, it's almost like because you're a homeopath and you're familiar with these types of diseases, you're calm about something that could get out of control, but you're calm because you have the security and knowledge of your remedies and how they work. And therefore you feel that this is something that humanity can cope with the knowledge. And that's what we want to be able to give you, the students in the class and the listeners, if you're open and willing to hear this message about this energy medicine and how it works and how you can educate yourself through training with Grant, just beginning slowly. And I think everybody should almost have a remedy kit at home so that they can deal with emergencies once they have some basic knowledge. So do you agree with that?
I do. It's a qualified agreement, and the qualification of that agreement is that people can't overestimate their own ability to be able to treat acute disease. I think when we're talking about a first aid kit that people should have, I think that's really good, because if people are in any sort of accident or they hurt themselves, remedies like arnica, for example, are on hand, and they can just be taken. They don't need a great deal of skill behind them or knowledge behind them for them to be effective. If you're dealing with something like the common cold or influenza, then providing the fever's not too high, you're just suffering those normal discomfort sort of symptoms from the common cold, then yes, I don't think that dabbling with the homeopathic remedies, even though you don't really know what you're doing, is going to cause any harm whatsoever. When we talk about remedies like scarlet fever, I mean, one of the major things to understand about scarlet fever is that the fever can get extremely high. So I guess that was a wrong, that was probably a wrong acute disease to say. I don't think that I would like to get across that people could treat themselves for scarlet fever.
No, but I implicated that as a homeopath, you felt comfortable dealing with this type
for
of...
me, yeah,
yes,
sure.
because you're so experienced, so many years of seeing these kinds of symptoms in children and adults.
Yep.
So there's the comfort level, and to know that you can call somebody who has experience to get some answers and get some assistance. And that we always encourage to see your healthcare provider. This show is always educational and informative, and that is really a conversation that you're tuned into. If anyone out in the classroom has a question or a comment at any time, please let us know and we will put you on. I'll relay the question to the listeners. And if you think that there's anything that anyone out there ought to know about Grant and Louise, who is the woman behind the scene, the woman behind the man, who really does all the organization of the website and has done so much more. I do want to do a shout out for Louise for all she does. And so if there's anybody who thinks that there's something, a key point that the people should know about this method, we would love to hear what that is. So I'm going to ask one question that Ellen has told me before we went on air, and she said that you're teaching that to us, and this is what we're getting, that there are two key things to finding the homeopathic remedy that fits the person's chronic illness. We must gather the person's symptoms, and I guess that's the totality of symptoms, and analyze the facial features. And the face, and this is where you're going to get into explaining, the face will tell us the internal energy of how the body handles stress. And you started that whole thing today with universal energy, and maybe you can give us a little bit more background about, people are going to ask, well, how can you tell in a person's face what the remedy is going to be?
Well, you can't tell from a person's face exactly what the remedy is going to be, but what you can do is that it helps you choose the right remedy. So the right remedy is chosen by a combination of factors. The first, for those that understand homeopathy, we've got the case taking, then we've got the repetrization, and then we've got the facial analysis as the addition at the end of that. Now, the facial analysis just tells us what remedy out of a group of remedies would probably be the best for this particular person. Because what we find is that we were just talking about individuality, and people will they will deal with stress in their own individual ways, and the remedies themselves have their own individuality about them. What I mean by this is if we just take an example, a physical example, then what we see is that in some people when they deal with certain allergens or different stresses, you might find that their immune system decides that it's going to be protective of its vital internal organs by throwing any stress or invading agent out onto the skin. And we see, or at least is out on as far to the periphery as what it possibly can. In people like that, we will often see that if they get really run down or they eat the wrong foods or they find themselves in situations that are too stressful for them for too long a period of time, they can begin to suffer symptoms like eczema or the, other skin symptoms, or they could have asthma or they could have bronchitis or whatever the case may be. But what we see there is that the first defensive attempt of the body is to throw any invader, whether invader being a microbial agent, or any stress onto the surface to protect the vital internal organs. Other people, however, may find that they have a system that tries to encapsulate stress or invading organisms to make sure, again, for the express purpose of ensuring the protection of the more vital internal organs. Now, what I mean by the encapsulating or encapturing, that means rather than throwing these microbial agent back out onto the skin, it will encapsulate it either with inflammation or it may do capture poisons in the form of tumours or cysts or so on. And so it's prepared, this is a system that is prepared to sacrifice a small area of the body for the greater good of the whole. So it's kind of utilitarian in that sense, that it's the greatest good for the greatest number, and what we'll do is that we'll lock these bugs or germs into this imprisoned area. So you can see these ways of dealing with stress and dealing with infection, they're common all the way through life. But what we've got to do when we choose a remedy for somebody is that we have to choose a remedy that has the same motion or power or the same method that is
innate to the body.
Yes, that's innate to the body. That the same sort of system that is already ingrained into that person's immune system. If I come along with a remedy and I give that remedy to somebody who is trying to encapsulate, and that's all they've got is that they have been programmed, their system has been programmed to imprison and encapsulate rather than throw to the surface. If I come out with a remedy that has a different action to that imprisoning action, then what you find in more generalised common terms is that people start getting side effects from that remedy. The side effect is an unwanted effect. You get a remedy or you take a medicine. It is specifically designed for a particular action, but in some people that action will still take place, but it will take place at the detriment of that patient's overall health. Now, usually why that occurs is because there is a disharmony between the action of the remedy or medicine and the action of that person's innate immune system. So when they are working in unison, that's when not only does healing turn around and become a lot easier, a lot less energetic for that patient, because healing ourselves takes an enormous volume of energy. You only have to know that the first time, everybody has experienced that when they start feeling unwell or start getting sick, one of the very first things that happens is that they just lose energy. They get very, very tired. They need to put themselves to bed. And even the whole process of eating, metabolizing, and the distribution of food is pretty much shut down for a short period of time. So all available energy can be used in this war that's going on inside us. So our appetite is usually decreased. We usually find that we are very tired, need to go to sleep. And that's just an example of how much energy it takes to fight off these sort of microbial invaders into our system. So any help that we can give it, providing that it's the right help, means that we are not only going to get over our illness a lot more quickly, but our recovery time is dramatically increased, meaning that instead of getting over the fever pitch of a particular illness and then being drained for another week to 10 days, we might find we get over that fever pitch and we're able to start feeling as if we can get on with our normal life within 2 or 3 days rather than a week to 10 days afterwards, because a lot of the energy of the remedy is being used instead of our own energy being
Not
used.
depleting more.
Yeah.
And what about people who do have these cysts, and you have this individual with encapsulating type of mechanism for the self-defense of the body, and then they go in and go to the doctor and have things poked or needle biopsies or removal of, how does the body respond to those kind of treatments?
Well, they're in trouble anyway, even by the time they get to that stage, because if it's to lock off a small area of the body, if you're talking about, it's going to try inflammation first. So then it builds a more secure prison.
Oh.
And then the more prisons that are being made, the more we're in trouble. So already we're seeing a system that is already out of balance. The real key to understanding, I guess, is knowing that the pathology is the outcome of everything that has preceded it. So when we're talking about, we write a lot and we speak a lot in our courses about dividing chronic disease into two different forms, and one is the infectious chronic disease that you see in, say HIV and tuberculosis and so on, where there isn't a viral or bacterial origin. But then there's another form of chronic disease which you see more in your cancer and you see in arthritis, which is more an outcome of the stresses. So it's not we're not seeing it as a disease in itself, but your system is still trying, and that's why I say your system's still trying to either push out or encapsulate any invader or stress. So it's still going to deal with it in exactly the same way because it's a program. Your immune system or your defense system is a pre-programmed aspect of nature that can't be reasoned with. So it's only going to monitor that it is under stress, but it doesn't try and establish what the cause of that stress is or deal with it in a different way. So if somebody is going to conventional medicine because they are starting to develop a range of tumours like what you're talking about before, look, the process that they're doing I don't want to get into, but I would say though that what we've really got to deal with is the lifestyle and the stresses that have got them to that point, because if that continues, that the tumours are already showing you that they are a signpost that you are not being able to cope with this. This is beyond what you're capable of being able to manage at an individual level. So you can go to someone like us and we will try and help you out with this, but there's still got to be some lifestyle changes here, because what we're not in the business of, we are not here to just prop you up so you can continue a lifestyle that's just not conducive for you.
It's not conducive to life.
Well, it's not conducive to life, and it's about seeing pathology as an adaptation to the stress. The pathology that you end up developing is your own body's attempt to try and deal with the stressors that are going on in the best, most manageable way it can. Now, if that means the sacrifice of you as a conscious individual, it will do that. But but what's really important, I guess, is to understand it need not be reach that point. But there has to be some sort of intervention, not only at an energetic level, but also at a conscious lifestyle level as well.
As you were speaking, I did hear something that sounded very much like DNA. It sounded like the individual's own innate programming, which to me sounds like DNA. And today we think that everything is triggered, either turned on or turned off, almost like a computer is, from those stressors of when something is going to, either at a certain age or with a certain stress in somebody's life or an environmental toxin that's going to turn that switch on at the DNA level. And if I think about silica, because silica, I don't know, because I haven't learned enough about this program to think it's an encapsulating and pushing out. It will take something like a splinter and push it out of the body. Am I off track? That I don't even know what color it is or anything. Brown. It's brown? Oh, well, it does a lot then. So
I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know what I'm asking. I'm just kind of putting out ideas that have come into my consciousness as you spoke, that, you know, this is very much like working with DNA.
Well, okay, let's run with that then. It is like that. You're right. It's very much like that. Although one of the major things that we're finding out about genetics at the moment, which is in a way kind of catching up to us rather than we're chasing after it in to incorporate its knowledge. We've already got that knowledge, and that knowledge is more about the knowledge of epigenetics. Epigenetics meaning that, look, the genetic blueprint is only one aspect. But in the genetic blueprint, what we see is that the genetic blueprint is kind of like a roadmap of where the body is to go under certain conditions. But those certain conditions have got to be there. And so it's like there is a whole heap of potential information that is lying in the genes. But the epigenetics tells us that certain trigger factors from the external world are needed to elicit that sort of genetic response. It's the idea that just because it's in your genes, the inevitability of that outcome is completely incorrect. You must have these sort of external triggers that are going to bring it on. And I guess when we're talking about the different colour groups like what we were doing today, what we're talking about there is that we are giving, we can tell by the face what kind of group people belong to. Now, when you talk about where does the face fit into this, which was part of that question, it fits in really strongly, because what it does is that it's a very good observable way of understanding what that genetic part of ourselves is. But that's only a huge pool of potential. That's what we've got to understand. And then when we do somebody's case, why we're doing the biography is to see where the natural triggers are that have triggered this response in that person. So what we can see is that we don't react to all stress in the same way. Some stress will really affect us at a very deep level, and other stress, even though it's completely unpleasant, doesn't knock us or rock us to our very core. One of the ways that we can tell that is whether or not once we've gone through a stress, that it somatizes and becomes a pathology. What I mean by that is that if we go through somebody's case history, a biography, and we get to an age, say, where a patient has a business failure, I will stop the case at that point, and I want to know any ramifications, physical ramifications that may or may not have occurred. Now, if they turn around and they say, yes, look, that's my health really depleted after that, and I ended up being in hospital with an infection, and then also too that you need to be plugged in.
I need to
there.
plug in my computer, otherwise we're going to shut down. Okay, so we're going to do that, and you can keep talking
Okay.
while they're plugging us in.
No, I can't because I've got to plug in.
We have to find a plug that will reach. Okay, we're going to try and keep us going live.
You in?
Here. Are you still with us, Amnon?
Everything is fine. I'll let you. Everything's
Okay. And Amnon, if you have any questions along the way, please chime in here.
fine. I have one comment.
Oh, we're waiting.
Look at the camera when you talk. Don't look at him.
Okay, I will do that. That's Amnon, my show producer, and I listen to whatever he tells me. So we are at the point of, where were we?
We are at the point of completely forgetting what I was talking
Okay,
about.
we were talking about the DNA and how we express ourselves and what the triggers are. What? The business
Yeah, that's
biography
right.
of the
Okay,
businessman, and something happened
So
to
what
him.
we have is that by doing the facial analysis, we understand what our patient is going to be most likely susceptible to, what different stressors that person is going to be susceptible to the most. Then what we do is we double check that, and we double check that by doing a case history. Now, say for example, like what we were saying is that somebody undergoes a business failure. That business failure then in turn gives such a shock to that person's system that what happens then is that they could get an infection, or they could start getting bronchitis, or they could start doing a whole range of things. But what they actually get is not the point. Well, the real point is that this person has not been able to deal with it at an energetic level. They have not been able to keep it from saturating them and altering their system around. Now, whenever you have a stress that is beyond endurance, that you can't hold back, then that is a stress that we need to be able to buffer you against. So that's part of what we're going to try and do when we select a remedy, is that we've got to try and select what areas of weakness you are susceptible to. And it can be really surprising. That same person, if we were to continue with their interview, we might find that later on in their life they've gone through a divorce or some sort of relationship breakup. And again, we check whether or not that person has suffered any physical ramifications of that. And we find that while it was terribly emotionally distressing, that none of the bronchitis or the infections or whatever it was that occurred in the after the business failure occur during this one. Now, that means that they're able to cope with that kind of stress better than they're able to cope with the financial loss. And it's really unpredictable what people can and can't cope with. And we are just designed to be able to withstand some things but not withstand others. Our face tells us the genetic part. We are able to put people into different groups. I mean, nothing is more genetically determined than our face. So that aspect shows us nature's program for dealing with stress. But what it doesn't do is that it doesn't tell us about the life that you've led, nor what sort of triggers.
I was going to
at you.
ask, even as a human being, receiving some kind of information or message can change how we respond to that information. For instance, and I keep going back to something kind of personal, but if you go for a BRC, whatever it is, the genetic testing for breast cancer, BCR, whatever it is, and they tell you that you have that genetic factor, then there are a lot of women out there who decide to have a double mastectomy just to prevent themselves from having to go through the cancer, the physical diagnosis and treatment. And I think that is so drastic, such a drastic measure for them to take just based on some information they're given. And like you said earlier, the DNA is a potential. It's not a reality, an actual, a definite. And I guess what I'm asking is the coping mechanism for the people who make a decision to remove a part of their body. I mean, what is happening? Is it emotional stress? Is it physical stress? And how would we incorporate that into the homeopathic case taking?
Well, in homeopathic case taking, it would just come down to the rubric fear of cancer.
Okay.
So, I mean, that'd be one of the major things. But I guess in saying that, I think it's really important to, I'm going to maybe differ from your own opinion a little here, but I'm not going to go down the avenue of suggesting that they've done the wrong thing. And one of the reasons for that is that because if they were not to do what they've done and say have a mastectomy or a double mastectomy, the fear that they could experience for the rest of their lives, wondering what is going to happen, and this entire focus on the possibility of cancer and the crippling nature that fear can have. Sometimes, you know, I leave that as a personal decision, and if they feel as if their life is going to be better, should they do that? Well, then I'm certainly not going to sit here and sort of say, well, I think you made a
No, I agree with
choice.
you. I just, for myself, I said it was personal. I think that it is a drastic measure, given what you said previously, that our DNA is potential. It is not an actual yet. But if...
Hello, you have a caller.
Hey, Debbie, we have a caller.
Hello? Dr.
Hi,
Bob?
this is Dr. Bob calling. This is a very interesting show. Thank you for being there, Grant. I have a question regarding this whole thing about stress. Adults in the modern world have numerous stressors, whether it's personal, professional, health, emotional. How does one narrow down a remedy using your technique in order to be able to treat such a patient?
Well, one of the major ways is like what I just said then. The less the body can physically deal with a particular stress, the more we know that the vital force has a susceptibility for that type of that sort of stress, or like what we were saying. I don't know how much you know about homeopathy, but for example, rather than the ailments from a breakup, in that last example that I was doing, I would be looking for rubrics like the ailments from a business failure, because I can tell in that make-believe scenario that we did that the person is going to be more rocked to the core by that business failure than the divorce because of the physical signs and symptoms, that physical breakdown that followed it. The other way that you can tell is by repeating patterns. I mean, it's a very complicated way of, it's too complicated to explain in 10 minutes, but essentially what happens is that the more that we go into what I call survival mode, that is trying to protect ourselves, the more you'll find that a repeating pattern of a particular type of stress occurs. Now, you see this often in people who experience stress at a very early age. If they come from an alcoholic background, as you know, it's quite common that a person may also select a spouse or become that's an alcoholic or become an alcoholic themselves. If they come from a violent background, they can also select a violent partner or become violent and abusive themselves. So the moment that we see that repeating pattern occur, the more I know that they are stuck into that groove of stress. and then I would go to the repertory, and what I would do then is that I would choose a rubric like violence as a primary. Now, it's not going to be the only rubric that I choose. I'm also going to choose a number of different generals, because the way to see the generals is to see it as the mechanism of the body trying to rebalance itself. So we may have violence as the cause, but then we have the pathology and the generals as the effect. And together with the cause and the effect, now we have the totality that Hahnemann was hoping that we would be able to achieve in every prescription.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Are there any cues you can get from your facial analysis techniques about which way to go on that?
Well, not so much in the selection of the rubrics, but where the facial analysis becomes really important is right at the end in discerning what group of remedies or what remedies we are going to choose out of the repertorized remedies that remain at the end of our repertorization. As you may or may not know, because I don't know your background, so again, I don't know how much you know about homeopathy.
I know quite a bit about homeopathy, yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at there is that if somebody is, let's just keep with the whole idea of encapsulating stress and encapsulating any sort of infection, then what we're looking at is something like Thuja. For example, if we were to do our repertorization, we see sulfur, Thuja, and mercury are coming through the highest. The facial analysis tells me that this patient belongs to this psychotic or more encapsulating group. So what I'm going to do then is that there's no need for me to question whether or not I should be giving sulfur or mercury. Thuja is my only choice. So
right.
it doesn't really help in the sense of what rubrics to choose. But after I've chosen the rubrics, in choosing the remedy from the miasmatic group that's going to fit the patient, it's absolutely imperative.
So,
Great. That's
Dr.
very
Bob,
interesting.
everybody is listening very, very attentively. And that's because Grant is a fantastic, dynamic teacher. And so we do want folks to know how to reach him. We're going to tell you at the end of the show. We also have a couple students who may like to say a few words about their actual experience using this method. And these are people who have tried other methods in the past to reach the most matching pattern remedy from their group, from their color group. And if there are some people who want to come up and talk with us, we would love to hear you. So you can see that this method that he presents to everybody really gives a sense of security and knowledge that you're doing the right thing and you're on the right track. And he teaches that when you come to the list, and if all of the remedies that this person fits in, let's say the brown group, that if there are 3 to 5 top remedies, you start with the top remedy that comes up in that group and you work down from there. Right? So it's a process, it's a method, it's a system that is very organized. You know you're on secure ground when you're working this method, and it really guides you to the healing energy that the person needs, that they need replenished, which has been lost during the crises, the stresses in their lifetime. And so we have here Sandy, who is with us and has been doing this
for about a year and a half. I took Grant's course, his online course, and I've worked with about 5 homeopaths personally with my own family. And we made progress, but I just felt like we weren't really getting the right remedies often and not consistently. And when I took the course and started to learn about the facial analysis, it really opened up sort of a much better success rate for our own family, which is how I've been judging all the different methods of homeopathy, really trying it on us. We all have chronic problems, and really seeing what works. I mean, I really think that's the only way to really choose what's going to work for you as a homeopath. I'm a fairly new homeopath, and I really needed to sift through all these different modalities and all the different ways of approaching it and see what worked for us. And I've really seen much better results.
Do you mind talking about the seriousness of the problems? Or you don't have to.
I can be kind of general. My kids probably don't want me to be specific.
Right. But these are things that a
yeah.
lot of people are
Yeah.
dealing with in today's
Yeah.
modern world.
We have a child on the autism spectrum, a child with, they're both adopted, so, and the other one, more basic, eczema, allergies, asthma, anxiety, that whole picture. And my husband's a cancer survivor, and I'm just, the chronically tired mom who's just so stressed out that my body sort of shorted out at some point. And all of us have really had great success with this method. And I would say what it has helped us to do is to pick remedies that we might not have even looked at. Like for my son, picking sepia, he's a boy, a young teenage boy, where traditionally you would maybe not look at that because it's thought of as a woman's remedy. So that's really...
So the results can be of the choice of remedy can be quite surprising, and it opens you up to new possibilities
yeah,
through this method.
So. Yeah, I would say that definitely can happen. Yeah, so I've had good results. I'm happy with it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Jean is another student here. We're so pleased to have the students, and there are possibilities for folks out there who want to pursue the healthcare profession and learn more about it to go online to the vcch.org and connect with Louise and Grant and see about classes, because there's distance education and a lot more. So, Jean, tell us your story.
Well, I'm a naturopath, and I've loved homeopathy ever since I, found out about it. And in my practice, I try to use classical homeopathy pretty much for every patient. And, you get your successes and you get your failures. And I really wanted a way to have a better success rate, because I love the puzzle, but a puzzle's not that much fun if you don't get all the pieces, together. And so I discovered this. I think I first heard about the facial analysis on the internet. And I thought, well, that was kind of fascinating, something that's objective. You can actually, see something instead of, guessing about the remedy. So I got a couple of the books, and I started a little bit doing it backwards. I would take a case and look back at some of the cases that, had successes and see if, by analyzing their facial structures, if they had agreed with the remedy I gave them and it had worked. I found well, yeah, they seem to, correlate pretty well. And so then I would start to do it, the actual way, where it's like you take a case, then you take the picture and do the facial analysis. And I found that it really, like you said, it opens up some remedies that you hadn't thought of, because you take a well-repertorized case and you say all these symptoms are for this remedy, but their face is saying that they're a different miasm than what this remedy belongs to. And so
the miasm, for the folks who are new to this, would be a structural features group.
Right, and so you say, well, they're not in that same group as the remedy that I was thinking it was. And so sometimes I would go ahead and give that remedy anyways and see, oh, it didn't work, even though it came out the strongest, and that's what I pictured it was, and I really thought that person was that remedy. But looking at their facial features, it's like they're in a different group. So then it does open up the possibilities, okay, well, let me look at these remedies that I hadn't really considered. And I find if I can do a good job at getting the features, which, I'm still learning, and sometimes it's a little bit, difficult. But if I have a clear facial analysis and I can find, the remedy, I find it works much better, and I get much more success than just doing repertorization and trying to compare the remedies when a lot of times the patient doesn't have any other symptoms that will differentiate, the last, a handful of remedies. So I find that the facial analysis really helps to, limit the number of remedies you have to pick from.
Right, it gives you that sense of security and narrows it down to a select group of remedies.
Right, so then it makes your job a little bit easier. You don't have to,
So all you naturopaths out there who have studied homeopathy, the homeopaths, I know acupuncturists and chiropractors are getting interested in homeopathy. There are methods to learn that will help you get your patients into a better place. And our time is really up. We did an hour show. I want to thank you again, Grant, and I want to thank all of the students at the class today for allowing us to take your time. And I want to thank all of the listeners out there who are tweeting and putting it on Facebook and sharing it with your friends. And we all have all of these shows archived for the future if you want to listen to them or watch them. On Wednesday, we will have Dr. Adil Kasim on Blog Talk Radio talking about, he's a cardiologist, and we answer any of your health questions. He does, really, not me. We've been discussing Kent's rubrics in the chess chapter of the repertory. On Thursday, we have Alan Phillips, attorney at law, talking about vaccinations and our rights. So that is our show. Amnon, I want you to thank you for being so flexible and letting us do this remotely today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. Sending all of you love out there because, love is the highest form of healing as far as I can believe. And so we were going to send that out to you and let it be a wave of awareness. Okay. Until next time.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Health In with Debbie Brooke, Mondays 11 a.m. to noon. The Scope of Things with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. Body Talk with Cindy Prince, first Tuesdays 8 to 9 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays 8 to 9 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by thatvidblasterguy.com, carolinaapparel.com, and deltaforce.net.